Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre campaigning in the Greater Toronto area. This election coming at a challenging time for Canadians amid a trade war and economic uncertainties. And the race obviously is going to culminate with a vote on April 28th. For more on Canada's political landscape, let's bring in Mark McQueen. He's founder of Wellington Growth Partners, more than 30 years of experience on Bay Street, also a former advisor in the Mulroney PMO and a Toronto Star columnist. It's nice to see you.
Good morning.
Okay, in what you have heard in the early days of what, based on the polls, became a tight race, which certainly didn't look like that when we were looking at the polling numbers before we were even talking about election just a few weeks ago. What have been your early observations?
Well, the first thing that happened is the NDP support, which had been around 21% for all last fall, whether it's Angus Reid or David Coletto Abacus, that's fallen to 10 or 7. So all those votes have gone to the Liberals. So it's not so much that that Mr. Carney has surged as much as the NDP have collapsed, right? Jack Layton got 30% in the 2011 election. If the NDP are at 7 or 8, just think about how dramatically different that outcome might have been.
Do you think the message there is that Canadians realize there's a big issue that we have to address here, and if you're less likely to win, then the votes are sort of steadily going into these two camps, liberals and conservatives at the end of the year?
It could be strategic voting. I mean, Trump's threats about tariffs were live in November. They were live in December, and the NDP vote still hung around 20. Has their leader performed as well as he has to win a bunch of seats? Perhaps not. Is it strategic voting? It may well be. I think this next 2 or 3 weeks will be determinative, probably.
What are your observations on the messaging to people who would like to see Canada's opportunity to grow amidst all of this? Yes, there's tough talk on the relationship with the United States, but what are we going to do as a country as a result? What are your takes on the positions that have been taken by the leading candidates?
That really is the whole ball of wax, right? If you're a business owner in Ontario, British Columbia, Quebec, and you look at the landscape, your confidence to invest is clearly down, and you've looked at the last 10 years and you've asked yourself, how did we get to the situation? I mean, Canada has been trying to grow its economy beyond the U.S. since the 60s, right? There have been royal commissions on all sorts of things that have recommended free trade at the same time as Chrétien would do Team Canada trips abroad to try and grow our alliances elsewhere, just as I think Mr. Harper did and Mr. Trudeau talked about, just never put the puck in the net, to use the very, this hockey metaphor now gets, I think, is very popular. I think the challenge is two things. Energy, if we are really going to grow our economy on that front, and the Prime Minister said he wants Canada to become a conventional energy superpower, that requires new pipelines. They have to go east, they have to go west. That requires legislative change and some stomach, and you can't have it both ways. You've got to pick a lane.
And interestingly, you have several vocal premiers these days, and sort of the collaboration between provinces and the federal government is also interesting to watch. It's also interesting to watch even on the campaign trail when you have Alberta's Premier, Danielle Smith, already talking about sort of a set of things she would like to see. This could be a bit of a boondoggle for these candidates as they're sort of making the rounds, because in both cases we're talking about two leaders in Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney who are not tested as of yet in a federal election campaign. So we'll see how they fare, I would imagine, on these touchy subjects.
All three, I think Quebec, Ontario, and Alberta's premiers are all reflecting their own constituencies, right? Yeah. Quebec wants to maintain its hydro relationships. Therefore, they are being very quiet on that front about any threats to the Boston and other markets about their hydro. Ontario cares about the auto market. So Mr. Ford has obviously gone to great lengths to try and build relationships and rapport with Washington. And for the Alberta Premier, I think, and this is what my piece in the Star tomorrow is going to be about, I think her laying out a pretty clear list of demands that match what the 14 pipeline and energy CEOs told the government last week is, if you want to grow the energy patch, like you've promised, this is how to do it. And if you don't, within 6 months, then there has to be talk about what Alberta's plans are to take a more independent role in its, take control perhaps of its life. And, we saw this 2 years ago when she talked about the Canada Pension Plan and to follow in Quebec's footsteps and to manage that money themselves. That didn't go very far, But this is not the first time that she's, I think, shown Canadians that they would like to be more independent, or at least be supported as they grow their economy.
And it's probably not a stretch to say that a Liberal government elected in Ottawa would be a frustration to at least some in Alberta. But it feels
doesn't have to be. That's the irony, is that the Prime Minister, when he took office there at the Liberal leadership, talked about supporting, the energy market. That requires a whole bunch of change to what's gone on the last 10 years.
I guess the bigger question for the collective Canada is that we went from what felt like, and you saw it reflected in the polling numbers, significant frustration to then fear. The fear of the unknown with what's happening in Washington right now. And I mean, just a remarkable change in the polling numbers. If you had to guess, the one or two things that stand out in this campaign that ultimately determine who emerges victorious, what do you think it ends up being?
Well, this April 2nd date, the Liberation Day, as President Trump is talking about on the tariff front, this war may end without a whole lot of shots being fired. You saw it in the media on Sunday and again yesterday. Just the tariffs don't sound quite as groundbreaking and self-defeating as we feared, and that's why the market rallied yesterday. And the futures this morning, despite some murmurs yesterday, seem pretty calm. If we get through April 2nd, and Ontario's auto industry perhaps, and other markets don't seem to be the focus of Mr. Trump's animus, then housing, cost of living, deficit spending, and all the things that were really hot topics for young Canadians in all of last year haven't gone away. They're maybe even worse. And that will, I think, focus people's attention on who is best equipped to fix that. And the fact that the Liberals now keep adopting Mr. Poilievre's policies to help address that only confirms he's the right, and certainly in the minds of many, he's the right practitioner to solve our problems.
Well, we'll see what the story of the day is come Election Day. I know it's not far off, but timing in politics is always important, and these days it moves quickly. Mark, thanks very much. Good to see you. Appreciate it. Mark McQueen joining us, former the CEO of Wellington.